Three signs of a spiritual awakening. Do you suspect that you're going through a spiritual awakening, but you're not sure? Well, hopefully these three signs of a spiritual awakening will help you. If you're new here, my name is David, and I am your spiritual awakening coach, here to help you through your spiritual awakening. Here are three signs you're having a spiritual awakening, part two. Number one, you are finally trusting and acting on your intuition. Okay, guys, this is a big one. Whenever you are acting on your intuition and you're trusting your intuition, you're trusting the downloads that you're getting from your higher self, from source consciousness, from the universe. Intuition comes to you through your heart. Your heart is the radio between you and the divine, between you and your higher self, you and your soul. So your team in the unseen will choose to communicate with you through your heart because they get to bypass the ego. The downloads that you get in your heart are devoid of ego, meaning they're typically devoid of fear. So this is why acting on your intuition is always in your highest good, because obviously your team in the unseen has your highest good in mind. Moreover, that soul aspect of yourself that knows why you chose to incarnate is also leading you on the direction that will keep you in alignment with why you decided to incarnate. And this is that compass of the heart that keeps you on that trajectory of why you decided to incarnate. So a lot of people will ask me, how do you trust your intuition? Well, you act on it. The more that you demonstrate to yourself that your intuition is always right, the more that you'll begin to trust it, which means you're going to be living less from the ego, less from the head, and more from the heart. So you're going to be choosing love more than you're choosing fear. When you're living more from the heart and less in your head, you're living more from your source self. Why is this? Because the heart is the energetic house of love. The dominant frequency of source is love. So the more that you're living from your heart, the more that you are on the path of unity consciousness, higher consciousness. The heart is the path to 5D consciousness. What is the ego? The ego is 3D consciousness, more in alignment with fear, more in alignment with the physicality, the duality of the 3D matrix. Both are necessary. We incarnated for the experience, but you get through this experience with much more grace and ease when you're living from the heart, because you're more on your source frequency. Now, one thing that I do want to make sure that you guys don't do is when you get that intuition, don't let the ego in. How do you know the ego is in the Kool-Aid, so to speak? Because you start to overanalyze, you start to dissect it, you start to pick it apart, and then you take this download that was meant for your highest good, that was coming from a place of love, and then you apply a whole bunch of fear, and then you compartmentalize it, and you overanalyze, and you overthink it, and then you kind of mess up the whole point of intuition in the first place. So how do you get the heads up if the ego is in the Kool-Aid? How do you know? Well, you're probably off into the future. The ego is outwardly focused energy. The ego is all about the future. But if you're in the present moment, you're most likely not in ego. You're more in your heart space. You see, the future doesn't actually exist, because once you get there, it's no longer the future. It's the present. All of your power is in the present now moment. So if you get some intuition and you're not sure how to interpret it, if you're interpreting it from a future scenario, the ego has most likely hijacked that intuition. And what you want to do is just get centered in the present now moment, sink into your heart space, and feel the heart's interpretation of that intuition. The heart communicates through feeling, not through language. The ego is all about language, but the heart will have a feeling. So you intuitively feel into the heart's feeling about what it says on that intuition, which is typically going to be devoid of fear. And then you move forward with that intuition. And this is how you trust your intuition. Number two, you are seeking to manifest from your heart instead of from your ego. So clearly, This spiritual awakening sign segues quite nicely from the previous sign. When you're manifesting from your heart, you're no longer manifesting from the perspective of lack, scarcity, and competition. It's the ego that believes in these 3D concepts such as lack, scarcity, and competition. When you manifest from your heart, you're stepping off of the competitive plane. The competitive plane believes that there's not enough for everybody, so you've got to get yours. You've got to take to get. There's not enough for everyone else, so you've got to do everything that you can and be as competitive as you can to get your needs met before anyone else does. This is the lie of the 3D ego and the 3D matrix. When you step off of the competitive plane and you step on the abundance plane, now there's more than enough for everybody. And isn't this life? Just look around at life. There's no shortage of grains of sand. There's no shortage of blades of grass. There's no shortage of trees, air, oxygen, animals. Life itself is abundance. And when you're manifesting from your heart, you're no longer manifesting from a place of not enoughness. You're no longer manifesting from a place of I don't have it. You're now manifesting from a place of I am it. And why would you be it? Because you are source having a physical experience. Source is absolute abundance. This means that your spiritual DNA is abundance itself. And once you start understanding that you are abundance, then abundance can simply share the same space with you because birds of a feather, like attracts like. And then when you are manifesting from the heart, you're no longer scared there won't be enough left for you. You have your fellow human's best interest in mind. What you want for yourself, you want for everybody because there's more than enough for everybody. This also helps you live as a much better human where you're not needing to try to take from others or manipulate in any way. You identify as abundance itself, and abundance effortlessly shares the same space with you. It's a much more freer and stress-free way to live, I promise you. Now, before we get on to the third sign of a spiritual awakening, if you're enjoying this content, you like spiritual awakening content, dark night of the soul content, anything having to do with transcendence and empowerment, please click the subscribe button. And every time you hit the subscribe button, know that you will be feeding this beautiful little fur baby. And number 3, you're feeling that internal shift from service to self to service to others. See how all of these spiritual awakening signs really intertwine quite nicely. You start trusting your intuition, which means you start to follow your heart more. The more you follow your heart, the more you manifest from your heart. You're manifesting from a place of abundance instead of lack. And the more that you operate from your heart, the more you naturally fall into an energy of service to others because you're no longer under the delusion that your needs will no longer be met. See, a lot of times when we choose a vocation in life, we listen to the ego. The ego will say, oh, well, if you go this route, you'll make a lot of money. Or if you go this route, you'll make your family and your culture proud. Or if you go this route, you'll have respect in society. The problem with that is that if that's not your passion, then you're going to find yourself in a place in your life where what you do, you don't really like. It's not your passion. And of course, it's not your passion because you didn't operate from your heart. Remember, the heart is the energetic house of love. Passion is a subset of the love frequency. So if you didn't choose what you do from the love frequency, then you chose from the ego frequency, and there's not going to be passion in what you do. And then if you have a spiritual awakening, which means there's going to be vibrational dissonance between the heart and the head. See, before you have a spiritual awakening, the heart and the head, they're kind of on the same frequency because the heart isn't really open yet. But after a spiritual awakening, the authentic frequency of the heart wants to be expressed, which is in alignment with the dominant frequency of love. That polar opposite frequency of fear, which is the ego, those two polar opposite frequencies have a hard time sharing space. So after a spiritual awakening, that vocation for which you have no passion, there's going to be a lot of vibrational dissonance with that. And now you're going to want to follow your heart. When you follow your heart, the universe is always going to back you up times 10, and a way will be made, regardless of whether or not your ego can see it in the present. Why would this be? Because the universe is you. The universe always has to have your back because the universe is also you. And the universe can express itself to a much greater degree if you are fully proliferated and in an expanding energy, which it can then proliferate and bless other aspects of itself, your fellow human, having a physical experience as the universe. Now, remember, these 3 spiritual awakening signs are part 2 of this series. So if you haven't seen part 1 of spiritual awakening signs, you can go watch that video right here. I love all of you guys. Namaste.